Field Marshal Sir Claude John Eyre Affleck GCB, GCIE, CSR, DSOOBE was a British Army commander during the Second World War. He was a career soldier who spent much of his military career in India, where he rose to become Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army by early 1941. In July 1941 he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Middle East Theatre, but after initial successes the war in North Africa turned against the British, and he was relieved of the post in 1942 during the crucial Alamein campaign. In June 1943 he was once more appointed Commander-in-Chief India, where his support through the organization of supply, maintenance and training for Slim's 14th Army played an important role in its success. He served as Commander-in-Chief India until partition in 1947, when he assumed the role of Supreme Commander of all British forces in India and Pakistan until late 1948. Early life and career. Born in Aldershot, the son of Colonel John Affleck and Mary Affleck, Affleck attended Eagle House School at Crowthorne and then Wellington College on scholarships. After attending the Royal Military College, Sandhurst, Affleck was commissioned as an unattached second lieutenant in the Indian Army on the 21st of January 1903 and joined to the 62nd Punjabis in April 1904. He learned some Punjabi and, able to speak fluently with his soldiers, he absorbed a knowledge of local dialects and customs. This familiarity engendered a lasting mutual respect, enhanced by his own personality. He was promoted to lieutenant on the 21st of April 1905 and then spent the next 2 years in Tibet and Sikkim before moving to Benares in 1907, where he caught diphtheria. After briefly serving with the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers at Aldershot, he returned Benares in 1909 and became adjutant of the 62nd Punjabis with promotion to captain on the 21st of January 1912. Affleck saw active service in the First World War and was deployed with his regiment to defend the Suez Canal. In February 1915 he was in action against the Turks at Ismailia. His regiment moved into Aden to counter the Turkish threat there in July 1915. The 6th Indian Division, of which the 62nd Punjabis were a part, was landed at Basra on the 31st of December 1915 for the Mesopotamian campaign. In July 1916 Affleck was promoted acting major and made second in command of the regiment. He took part in a series of fruitless attacks on the Turks at the Battle of Hana in January 1916 and was one of the few British officers in his regiment to survive these actions. He became acting commanding officer of his regiment in February 1917 and led his regiment at the Second Battle of Kut in February 1917 and the fall of Baghdad in March 1917. Having been mentioned in dispatches and having received the Distinguished Service Order in 1917 for his service in Mesopotamia, he was promoted to the substantive rank of Major on the 21st of January 1918, to Temporary Lieutenant Colonel on the 23rd of May 1919 and to Brevet Lieutenant Colonel on the 15th of November 1919 for his distinguished service in southern and Central Kurdistan, on the recommendation of the Commander-in-Chief of the Mesopotamia Expeditionary Force. Between the World Wars, Affleck attended the Staff College, Quetta between 1920 and 1921. He married Jessie Stewart in 1921. Jessie had been born in 1900 in Tacoma, Washington, to Alexander Stewart's head of the Blue Funnel Line that plied the west coast of the United States. When he died about 1919, the mother took her twin brother Alan and her younger brother Hepburn back to Bunrannoch, the family estate at Innerhaddon in Perthshire, holidaying at grass on the French Riviera. Auchinleck, who was on leave from India at the time, met Jessie on the tennis courts. She was a high-spirited, blue-eyed beauty. Things moved quickly, and they were married within 5 months. 16 years younger than Auchinleck, Jessie became known as the Little American Girl in India, but adapted readily to life there. Auchinleck became temporary Deputy Assistant Quartermaster General at Army Headquarters in February 1923 and then second in command of his regiment, which in the 1923 reorganization of the British Indian Army had become the 1st Battalion, 1st Punjab Regiment. In September 1925, he attended the Imperial Defence College in 1927 and, having been promoted to Lieutenant Colonel on the 21st of January 1929, he was appointed to command his regiment. Promoted to full colonel on the 1st of February 1930 with seniority from the 15th of November 1923, he became an instructor at the Staff College, Quetta in February 1930 where he remained until April 1933. He was promoted to temporary brigadier on the 1st of July 1933 and given command of the Peshawar Brigade, which was active in the pacification of the adjacent tribal areas during the Momond and Bajarur operations between July and October 1933. During his period of command he was mentioned in dispatches. He led a second punitive expedition during the Second Momond campaign in August 1935 for which he was again mentioned in dispatches. Promoted to Major General on the 30th of November 1935 and appointed a Companion of the Order of the Star of India on the 8th of May 1936. On leaving his brigade command in April 1936, Auchinleck was on the unemployed list until September 1936 when he was appointed Deputy Chief of the General Staff and Director of Staff Duties in Delhi. He was then appointed to command the Meerut district in India in July 1938. In 1938, Auchinleck was appointed to chair a committee to consider the modernization, composition and re-equipment of the British Indian Army. The committee's recommendations formed the basis of the 1939 Chatfield Report, which outlined the transformation of the Indian Army. It grew from 183,000 in 1939 to over 2,250,000 men by the end of the war. Second World War. On the outbreak of war, Auchinleck was appointed to command the Indian 3rd Infantry Division, but in January 1940 was summoned to the United Kingdom to command 4th Corps, the only time in the war that a wholly British corps was commanded by an Indian Army officer. He received promotion to acting Lieutenant General on the 1st of February 1940 and to the substantive rank of Lieutenant General on the 16th of March 1940. In May 1940, Auchinleck took over command of the Anglo-French ground forces in Norway, a military operation that was doomed to fail. After the fall of Norway in June 1940, he briefly commanded 5th Corps before becoming General Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Southern Command in July 1940, where he had an uneasy relationship with his subordinate Bernard Montgomery, the new 5th Corps commander. Montgomery later wrote, "In the 5th Corps I first served under Auchinleck. I cannot recall that we ever agreed on anything. India and Iraq January to May 1941, promoted to full general on 26 December 1940. Auchinleck was recalled to India in January 1941 to become Commander-in-Chief, India, in which position he also was appointed to the Executive Council of the Governor-General of India and appointed ADC General to the King, which ceremonial position he held until after the end of the war. In April 1941, Raf Habaniya was threatened by the new pro-Axis regime of Rashid Ali. This large Royal Air Force station was west of Baghdad in Iraq, and General Archibald Wavell, Commander-in-Chief Middle East Command, was reluctant to intervene, despite the urgings of Winston Churchill, because of his pressing commitments in the Western Desert and Greece. Auchinleck, however, acted decisively, sending a battalion of the King's Own Royal Regiment by air to Habaniya and shipping the Indian 10th Infantry Division by sea to Basra. Wavell was prevailed upon by London to send Hab Force, a relief column, for the British Mandate of Palestine, but by the time it arrived in Habaniya on 18 May, the Anglo-Iraqi War was virtually over. Following the seesaw of Allied and Axis successes and reverses in North Africa, Auchinleck was appointed to succeed General Sir Archibald Wavell as Commander-in-Chief Middle East Command in July 1941. Wavell took up Auchinleck's post as Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army, swapping jobs with him. As Commander-in-Chief Middle East, Auchinleck, based in Cairo, held responsibility not just for North Africa but also for Persia and the Middle East. He launched an offensive in the Western Desert, Operation Crusader, in November 1941, despite some tactical reverses during the fighting, which resulted in Auchinleck replacing the 8th Army Commander Alan Cunningham with Neil Ritchie. By the end of December, the besieged garrison of Tobruk had been relieved and Rommel obliged to withdraw to El Agila. Auchinleck appears to have believed that enemy had been defeated, writing on 12 January 1942 that the Axis forces were beginning to feel the strain and were hard-pressed. In fact, the Axis forces had managed to withdraw in good order, and a few days after Auchinleck's optimistic appreciation, having reorganized and been reinforced, struck at the dispersed and weakened British forces, driving them back to the Gazala positions near Tobruk. The British Chief of Imperial General Staff, Alan Brooke, wrote in his diary that it was nothing less than bad generalship on the part of Auchinleck. Rommel's attack at the Battle of Gazala of 26 May 1942 resulted in a significant defeat for the British. Auchinleck's appreciation of the situation, written to Ritchie on 20 May, had suggested that the armoured reserves be concentrated in a position suitable to meet both a flanking attack around the south of the front or a direct attack through the centre. In the event, Ritchie chose a more dispersed and rearward positioning of his two armoured divisions, and when the attack in the centre came, it proved to be a diversion, and the main attack by Rommel's armoured formations came round the southern flank. Poor initial positioning and subsequent handling and coordination of Allied formations by Ritchie and his corps commanders resulted in a heavy defeat, and the 8th Army retreating into Egypt. Tobruk fell to the Axis on 21 June 1942. On 24 June, Auchinleck stepped in to take direct command of the 8th Army, having lost confidence in Neil Ritchie's ability to control and direct his forces. Auchinleck discarded Ritchie's plan to stand at Mersa Matruh, deciding to fight only a delaying action there, while withdrawing to the more easily defendable position at El Alamein. Here Auchinleck tailored a defense that took advantage of the terrain and the fresh troops at his disposal, stopping the exhausted German Italian advance in the first battle. Battle of El Alamein. Enjoying a considerable superiority of material and men over the weak German-Italian forces, Auchinleck organized a series of counterattacks. Poorly conceived and badly coordinated, these attacks achieved little. The Auk, as he was known, appointed a number of senior commanders who proved to be unsuitable for the positions, and command arrangements were often characterized by bitter personality clashes. Auchinleck was an Indian Army officer and was criticized for apparently having little direct experience or understanding of British and Dominion troops. His controversial chief of operations, Major General Dorman Smith, was regarded with considerable distrust by many of the senior commanders in 8th Army. By July 1942, Auchinleck had lost the confidence of Dominion commanders and relations with his British commanders had become strained. Like his foe Rommel, Auchinleck was subjected to constant political interference, having to weather a barrage of hectoring telegrams and instructions from Prime Minister Churchill throughout late 1941 and the spring and summer of 1942. Churchill constantly sought an offensive from Auchinleck, and was downcast at the military reverses in Egypt and Cyrenaica. Churchill was desperate for some sort of British victory before the planned Allied landings in North Africa, Operation Torch, scheduled for November 1942. He badgered Auchinleck immediately after the 8th Army had all but exhausted itself after the First Battle of El Alamein. Churchill and the Chief of the Imperial General Staff, Alan Brooke, flew to Cairo in early August 1942 to meet Auchinleck, where it emerged he had lost the confidence of both men. He was replaced as Commander-in-Chief Middle East Command by General Sir Harold Alexander. India 1942–1945. Churchill offered Auchinleck command of the newly created Persia and Iraq Command, but Auchinleck declined this post, as he believed that separating the area from the Middle East Command was not good policy and the newer arrangements would not be workable. He set his reasons out in his letter to the Chief of the Imperial General Staff dated the 14th of August 1942. Instead he returned to India, where he spent almost a year unemployed, before in June 1943 being again appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army. General Wavell meanwhile having been appointed Viceroy. On this appointment it was announced that responsibility for the prosecution of the war with Japan would move from the CNC India to a newly created Southeast Asia Command. However, the appointment of the new command's Supreme Commander, Admiral Louis Mountbatten, was not announced until August 1943, and until Mountbatten could set up his headquarters and assume control, Auchinleck retained responsibility for operations in India and Burma while conducting a review and revision of Allied plans based on the decisions taken by the Allied Combined Chiefs of Staff at the Quadrant Conference, which ended in August. Following Mountbatten's arrival, Auchinleck's India Command was responsible for the internal security of India, the defense of the northwest frontier and the build-up of India as a base, including most importantly the reorganization of the Indian Army, the training of forces destined for SEAC in the lines of communication carrying men and material to the forward areas and to China. Auchinleck made the supplier of 14th Army, with probably the worst lines of communication of the war, his immediate priority. As William Slim, commander of the 14th Army, was later to write, "It was a good day for us when he took command of India, our main base, recruiting area and training ground." The 14th Army, from its birth to its final victory, owed much to his unselfish support and never-failing understanding. Without him and what he and the Army of India did for us, we could not have existed, let alone conquered. Divorce. Affleck suffered a personal disappointment when his wife Jessie left him for his friend Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Peace. Peace and Affleck had been students together at the Imperial Defence College, but that was long before. Peace was now Allied Air Commander-in-Chief, Southeast Asia, and also based in India. The affair became known to Mountbatten in early 1944, and he passed the information to the Chief of the RAF, Sir Charles Portal, hoping that Peace would be recalled. The affair was common knowledge by September 1944, and Peace was neglecting his duties. Mountbatten sent Peace and Lady Affleck back to England on the 28th of November 1944, where they lived together at a Brighton hotel. Peace had his marriage dissolved, and Affleck obtained a divorce in 1946. Affleck was reportedly very badly affected. According to his sister, he was never the same after the breakup. He always carried a photograph of Jessie in his wallet even after the divorce, partition of India and later years. Affleck continued as Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army after the end of the war, helping, though much against his own convictions, to prepare the future Indian and Pakistani armies for the partition of India. In November 1945 he was forced to commute the more serious judicial sentences awarded against officers of the Indian National Army in face of growing unease and unrest both within the Indian population and the British Indian Army. On the 1st of June 1946 he was promoted to Field Marshal, but he refused to accept a peerage, lest he be thought associated with a policy that he thought fundamentally dishonourable. Sending a report to British government on the 28th of September 1947, Affleck wrote, "I have no hesitation whatever in affirming that the present Indian cabinet are implacably determined to do all in their power to prevent the establishment of the Dominion of Pakistan on firm basis." When partition was effected in August 1947, Affleck was appointed Supreme Commander of all British forces remaining in India and Pakistan, and remained in this role until the winding up and closure of the Supreme HQ at the end of November 1948. This marked his effective retirement from the army. He left India on the 1st of December, after a brief period in Italy in connection with an unsuccessful business project. Affleck retired to London, where he occupied himself with a number of charitable and business interests and became a respectably skilled watercolour painter. In 1960 he settled in Beccles in the county of Suffolk, remaining there for 7 years until, at the age of 84, he decided to emigrate and set up home in Marrakesh, where he died on the 23rd of March 1981. Memorials. Affleck was buried in Ben Msik European Cemetery, Casablanca, in the Commonwealth War Graves Commission plot in the cemetery, next to the grave of Raymond Steed, who was the second youngest non-civilian Commonwealth casualty of the Second World War. A memorial plaque was erected in the crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral. The tour guides relate how in 1979, as plaques for the other great Second World War military leaders were being installed, no one in the establishment had been in contact with his family for some years. Cathedral officials telephoned to inquire the date of his death, only to be told, "Affleck here, but I won't be keeping you much longer." Awards and decorations. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath. Companion of the Order of the Bath Momond Operations, 7th of October 1933. Knight Grand Commander of the Order of the Indian Empire. Companion of the Order of the Star of India Momond Operations, 8th of October 1935. Distinguished Service Order. Officer of the Order of the British Empire. Mention in dispatches twice. Croix de Guerre with Palm. Chief Commander of the Legion of Merit. Virtuti Militari, 5th Class. War Cross. Order of the Star of Nepal. Knight Grand Cross of Order of St. Olaf. Publications. Affleck, Claude. Operations in the Middle East, the 5th of July 1941 to the 31st of October 1942. London, War Office, number 37695, pp. 4215-4230. The 20th of August 1946. Auchinleck, Claude. Operations in the Middle East, the 1st of November 1941 to the 15th of August 1942. London, War Office, No. 38177, pp. 309-400. The 13th of January 1948. Auchinleck, Claude. Operations in the Indo-Burma Theatre based on India from the 21st of June 1943 to the 15th of November 1943. London, War Office, number 38274, pp. 2651-2684. The 27th of April 1948.